Hello, everyone. We're back. This is the Future of Technology panel. And you all can come on up. We've got Ariel Garten, Dave Icky, and Walter de Brouwer coming up and joining me. I'll let them formally introduce themselves. Grab a seat. I'm just going to need this later on. And also, we will be, as with the rest of the panels, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So you can tweet at #future, #EngadgetSF, and we'll be asking questions a little bit later on. So first off, if I could just, starting with you, Ariel, if you can just kind of introduce yourself and your company and kind of what you do.
Sure, thanks, Michael. So my name is Ariel Garten. I'm from Interaxon, and we create brain sensing technology. So the thing I'm wearing on my head right now is Muse. It's a brain sensing headband. There are sensors on the forehead and behind the ears, and it's able to send your brain data wirelessly to your smartphone or tablet. I'll put this back on so you can see my brain for a second. There you go. That is me live and in real time. So we have this product coming out to market at the end of the year, and we create experiences and applications that help you both understand yourself and interact with technology using your mind. On to you.
Hi, Dave Icky from MC10. We're based in Cambridge, Mass. And what we're trying to do is reshape conventional computer chip technology into something that moves seamlessly with the human body. So we're pursuing a number of different applications from sports and fitness, cosmetics, and then moving those same type of thin wearable devices into connected or digital health. We also partner with medical device companies to deploy microelectronics inside the body for a number of different healthcare applications.
And Walter?
Hello, I'm Walter de Brouwer. My company is Scanadu, and so we are based in Moffett Field at NASA Ames Research. We are making a personal medical device that scans vital signs and bodily fluids. And with this, we are competing in the X Prize tricorder, sponsored by Qualcomm.
So just kind of hearing your brief description of what your companies are doing, it seems like all three of you are very much focused on kind of giving access to information that maybe people haven't had access to before, both about the body and maybe their surrounding environments as well. So can you just talk a little bit about, I guess I'll start with you, Ariel, like why is that important? Like why is that the future? Why do you see that being so important moving forward?
So we, as humans, go through experiences all the time, and it's rare that we're given information that lets us reflect back on ourselves so that we can actually understand why we did things and potentially who we are. So with technology like brain sensing technology or any of the new digital sensor revolution items that we're seeing, you're given the opportunity to actually track what's going on so that you can reflect back, you can learn something about yourself, and either embrace the person that you are, or if you're not liking it, do something to improve and change it.
Yeah, I think one important concept is that you can't change what you can't measure. And if you think about how we measure what's happening with our bodies, we might jump on a scale once a week. We might, if we're lucky, go to the doctor once a year for a physical. Sometimes it's longer than that. So our access to data is very episodic. They're like little points in time, which give us only a very small snapshot of what's happening. If you flip that around and say, I want to measure things continuously, that gives you a much more complete picture. You can set triggers for yourself that get you access to healthcare if and when you need it. But the barriers to wearables have been substantial. Probably in this audience, there are lots of early adopters that are willing to try new things out. Things have gotten smaller. Electronics have gotten smaller, faster, and cheaper through Moore's law. But they're still fundamentally mismatched with the human body because the human body is soft and curvy, and most electronics are rigid and boxy. So the idea is that if you can make sensing truly seamless, you can get a lot more people to adopt, right? In healthcare, the very young and the very old are some that need most, they need healthcare, and they're probably not going to be willing to wear a conventional wearable device.
I think the, sorry, does it work?
think so. I think he can just
So I think that we are continuously looking to structure ourselves and our society more by the tools we use. So with the personal computers, we tended to think ourselves as a personal computer, and so with the internet as an internet. And I think what is it, the 21st century tool today? It's data itself, and more we will think ourselves as just big collections of data, and we would like to measure that, because up to now we have not been able to, because there were no instruments. The only instrument, if something happens at home, is a thermometer and perhaps a scale or a spoon in the kitchen. So more and more these new devices become available. If you now go into the Apple store, you already have a big collection of these devices which you can try out. And I find it so amazing that in a short period of time, while we are thinking of, that companies like Google are actually making a global brain, that hundreds of companies like ours are actually together at warp speed making that global body, and with a lot of personalized information. And I think that's why we make these tools, because without a tool, the data is unstructured, and we are notoriously bad with unstructured data. We just put structure on it. So it makes more sense to make the tool so that the data is structured and we can measure it and improve it and probably change it in real time.
So with these, you kind of three are in the business of gathering the data, it seems, with the devices that you're doing. I mean, what has been a bigger challenge, like finding a way to acquire the data, or what to do with that data once you've got it, like to make it useful to people moving forward in the future?
I don't know which I would say is a bigger challenge. Both of them definitely are challenges. Up until very recently, you certainly couldn't just slip on an EEG and be able to know what's going on in your mind. And that's led to the problem of, once we have that data, what do we do with it? Because this sort of era that we're in, where we have masses of data, is really novel. So I might be able to know what's going on in my mind, and I can see very simple measures, my state of focus, relaxation, maybe like, dislike, but moving that into larger, more complex interactions between my mind and machine, or my mind and my own understanding of my mind, is a multi-year process that only starts when somebody puts a device on their head. Only at that point do you have enough data to even have the privilege of having the problem to figure out what you do with all this data.
I think in order to get a good insight that can actually allow you to affect your behavior, you really need to have a system solution that's mindlessly simple, right? It's got to work right out of the box. It's got to be something you don't have to think about. No question, mining big data in the cloud and trying to extract that insight is a challenging problem. But I think it's equally important to make sure that you have good quality information, good quality data going in. And if you have something that's bouncing around as you live your daily life, you're going to get a lot of noise, a lot of interference in the data, and you're not going to be able to do much with it. And so I think that you have to look at the entire system. You have to make sure that it works in a very simple way together, so that the user doesn't have to think about it. They're just delivered an insight, or maybe their healthcare provider or loved one gets a trigger or a text or an email that allows them to assess that data.
Yeah, I think the challenge in the data is in the data sets which are actually not talking to each other. So if you go to any hospital, you will see, based on real estate, that there is an emergency room where they collect your, mostly electrical data of your vital signs. They will have labs where you can have your urine analysis, your blood analysis, and then they have radiology where they do CT and MRI scans. And then in the end, the doctor comes and makes a diagnosis based on these 3 different data sets. Now the fusion of all, imaging data and molecular diagnostics plus electrical data, I think that's pretty challenging.
And so with all of these, various companies building out these platforms and trying to solve these problems, it seems to me that there's a real question about having all of this work together. Like that's kind of, and not just in your context, with everything with smartphones, we have kind of siloed ecosystems that are springing up. Do you see in the future that maybe, is that going to be the trend that continues? We're going to have, everybody has their own siloed formats or whatever, or will there be a way for kind of everything to come together and work together?
I think we're definitely moving towards aggregation. You have siloed concepts as people come into the market with their own silo that they take care of, but very quickly you're seeing cell phone companies coming out with platforms to try to aggregate everybody's biodata. All of us in the sensor world are friends with everybody else in the sensor world, and we keep having conversations about how can my API talk to your API so that we can do something meaningful together. We all understand that data standing alone is meaningless. Data requires context. And the more that you can layer context with different data sets together, the more useful we're all going to be at understanding ourselves.
Yeah, I think the siloed world has to go away. These problems are too big for any single organization or company to solve in isolation. So there have to be clear handoffs between different players, different groups. There needs to be some standardization. There needs to be some ways of handling data privacy. It's really going to be critical that integration and those handoffs are happening, and it's not necessarily natural. In connected health, for example, you have consumer companies and you have medical device companies. Device companies don't typically do much with consumers. Consumer companies are usually somewhat paranoid about FDA regulation, probably with good reason. So some of the teams that can help bridge that gap and connect those things together, I think will have a leadership position and a first mover advantage in bringing some of these solutions to market. And I think it's a really exciting time in the digital health world because the technology is now there and people recognize the big opportunity, and those groups and organizations are working on a common solution that'll deliver a lot of value.
So we're also, we are a consumer technology company, and up to a year ago, I decided not to go FDA because basically it's about consumers. And although I realize that we are on the evening of probably a big battle for ownership of our own body, I thought, why involve a government? But then, on the other hand, and in September I changed my mind because somebody asked me when I said consumers need their medical instruments and they are entitled to. And so he said, well, don't you think they're also entitled to accurate data, which is tested by their governments and their peer reviewed by. And he was right. I changed my mind and I went FDA because I want to prove that the data that we can deliver to patients and to consumers, can be of the same grade that the data that is used in clinics and hospitals.
So generally speaking, I know it seems like it's a fairly small world, so to speak, with the people that are kind of in the health realm, but I'm kind of curious to see, maybe not everybody's friends in other industries and places where, technology is moving forward. Do you think that those kinds of coming together can work in other aspects of technology and how that can happen, like whether we're talking about, cell phones or home entertainment or anything? Because it feels like a lot of these things, especially with your device, Ariel, it obviously has applications for other things, whether it's, in gaming, home entertainment, those kinds of things. And, you're dealing with very different industries. Do you think that can happen even if maybe you don't see everybody at the same conferences and those kinds of things? How can we get to the place where everything plays nicely together?
So one of the cool things about making a technology and having a good idea, and I'm sure we all experience this, is that people come to you and they say, I have a gaming company, I'd like to use your technology. I have a car company, it may be called Honda, I would like to use your technology. I have a fill in the blank of any of the other probably 50 big companies we've all heard from in the last year. So I think in that way it allows us to be the sort of linchpin that creates a standard that can then develop and disseminate through these different areas, whether it's in gaming or sporting or driving. And so you end up having one person, the user, who has one critical set of data, be it their brains, their hearts, their flu state, that can be aggregated through the sensor folks and then shared effectively through the different verticals.
Yeah, I think it's definitely much broader than healthcare, right? You hear Jeff Immelt from GE talking about the Internet of Things. Chambers at Cisco is doing the same thing. I mean, big, some of the biggest companies in the world are recognizing that not just people are going to be connected, and we're not going to just connect through our internet, computing screens, but all objects sort of everywhere will end up being connected. And I think that forces different players, people that are doing sensing, people that are doing computation, people that are delivering a result based on that, to come together in different ways. And that's clearly something that's already beginning to happen. And there has to be an urgent problem that people have focus on wanting to solve in order to bring people together with the right level of urgency. But we're seeing it happen in a number of different areas that are clearly beyond just body monitoring and computing.
What we have found is that consumers are very, there's this business model out there that they would immediately go for, and that is passive collection as a service. So just imagine that 10 years from now, preventive medicine has disappeared because it's probably been completely embedded into the environment with all sorts of sensors. And your TV could watch you, your music could listen to you, and you could even take subscriptions to that data or that data stream. And so the combination of passive collection, where they don't have to do anything, but it is done for them, plus as a service where they could actually just subscribe. We tested that in 5 states in the United States, and it's what people want. We just, at this moment, cannot deliver it.
So just to kind of shift gears here, I mean, it seems like, Walter, I know you're not quite in the wearables realm, even though that's kind of shifting. I mean, but it seems that, particularly with Google Glass is kind of the, I guess, the hot button product that everyone's talking about. I mean, are wearables kind of what you guys seeing being the future of the way we interact with technology, generally speaking? Like, is the cell phone going to be kind of a transient, period of time where eventually, whether we're using, eye movements or brain waves, those kinds of things, I mean, is that how you see us interacting with things, or will touchscreens and those kinds of, physical interactions going to be always part of the deal?
I'm guessing we kind of come from the same school of thought, which is that even wearable is probably too big and bulky, and we probably are moving towards a space where technology is as invisible as possible. Technology should only be there to support our human interactions, and the reason it becomes wearable and cell phone screens move up next to your eyes rather than in your pockets is so that we can interact with technology really naturally, so it gets out of the way so that we can be humans. So for me, the curve from wearable to invisible is something that I hope moves really quickly, which you're doing a great job at supporting.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are trying to make sensing really passive and virtually invisible to the user. And a smart sensing sticker that's 30 microns thick, like the biostamp, is a means of really trying to make that happen. I think the wearable does not replace the smartphone necessarily, right? The human-computer interaction is going to change, and we saw examples of that, in the Connect talk, just a few minutes ago. But there's still a place for a communicating hub that can take and upload data. If you look at getting high quality data into that system, that's where invisible wearables can have a lot of value and a lot of benefit. And it is interesting that wearables have been in development now for, big clunky wearables have been around for a long time. Things have gotten better and better and have become more consumerized really in the last several years. And and finally, even we were talking about the VCs on Sand Hill Road are now waking up to it because of Google Glass and because of Apple and their wrist-mounted system that they're rumored to be working on. Yeah. So that's probably a sign that that the bubble is here if that's the case.
Yeah, I think so I really like and love the technology like MC10 is doing, because basically we are living in microprocessors. Our houses are microprocessors, our cars are microprocessors. It's only a matter of time before these microprocessors will live in us, and we're very willing to do this. We are willing to be the host to the parasite, and I think my medical records should be in my body. That's where they belong.
So it's funny that you talk about it in terms of the host of the parasite. Obviously for some people, like you were saying, we're kind of amongst a crowd where people are very comfortable with new technologies, bleeding edge, but there's obviously lots of people who this might kind of freak out, both in terms of wearing things or maybe having implantables, kind of the invisibility where that's headed, but also just in the amount of very, very personal data that's being acquired. So, how do you respond to those kinds of concerns that people have, when they're talking about both dealing with the device and the data that it's pulling from their bodies?
So for us, it's about making things that are really close to existing natural human behaviors and making things that are not at all scary. We're here to enhance and enable the things that you want to do and not go to scary places. I'd never talk about implantable devices. That's way down the road. If anybody ever feels like getting there, and it's down there. In terms of your own data, you always own your own data in every system that we build and every system that we advocate. So you may, some people are kind of afraid of knowing what's going on in their mind, which is perhaps something I can encourage you to get over, because self-understanding is really helpful. But once you get over that small hurdle of being willing to look at the self, it's a bunch of data that sits in your computer and that you own and that you have access to.
I think the benefit has to outweigh the risk, right? I remember 15 years ago, people were talking about Amazon and would people really shop online, and over time things change. You do have to protect and encrypt things to make sure data is protected, but if there's value in being able to do something more quickly or more cost effectively or with higher efficacy, it's going to happen. And I think having biometric information or environmental information that's coming in a distributed way on all of us is, has such an advantage in terms of allowing us to proactively manage our behavior and manage our health, that it will end up being ubiquitous. It can be abused like anything, and there needs to be ways of protecting and making sure that the patient ultimately does own the data, so that the consumer isn't violated.
I agree with Kevin Kelly that data wants to be common, and so that people should own their own data. And on the other hand, when you look at when you have kids and they are teenagers, when you look at what they put on Facebook, I don't think there will be a lot of privacy in the future.
Yes, definitely our concepts of privacy are changing rapidly as time goes on, and you have shifting intergenerational awareness of what, why would you be private is the question. And
so you just think it'll eventually be Facebook people will be sharing what their brains are thinking and their emotional states all the time? Like that just seems like a logical outgrowth from where we are today?
I think people are kind of doing that anyways. Yeah. You are sharing what most people would think would be far too intimate details about yourself in a network that's broadcast widely. And I'm always curious how that sort of changes the structure of society when we are all comfortable with new kinds of information that we share with one another. When there's a new level of trust and a new level of acceptance because, okay, you're on Facebook, this person shares that he had a shitty day and he feels sad right now, and 50 people can rally around and say, it's okay, we love you, feel better, you're awesome too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a lot easier to change behavior when you have a community behind you, and whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, or if you look at what Nike has done with the fuel ban and the community they've created, and sharing fuel points with other people that is that private information? Well, sort of, but it also helps create an environment where there's positive peer pressure and motivation to take those extra steps, skip the elevator, or go do that workout when you're really not feeling like it at the end of the day.
But I think we have to go back to this choice. So if you find yourself in an environment where you feel safe to reveal, you can reveal.
Yes.
And if you don't, you don't. It's always your choice to be private.
And you can opt in and opt out and select what you want to share and select what you want to keep private. And different people have different approaches to that.
Yeah, I think the main, a lot of companies all over the world now believe in, data mining will save us. It's a sort of a Stockholm syndrome. We'll kidnap the data and it will love us in the future without really having a good strategy how to do this. But I think what I quickly will find out that the data is not so important as chasing the data through your algorithms so that to make your algorithms more precise. And then keeping that data is actually not such a big deal anymore. It's about how precise, how many data points have you chased through your algorithms so that these algorithms almost are free of error.
By the way, when you said your reference to data made me think that data is the new kind of oil, and people are going to now be mining for data in the way that we mine for oil. It's going to be the currency. And that leads you to ask, well, if the Middle East was in a massive position of power because they had so much oil, who's going to be in a position of power now when they have data or access to that data?
Yeah.
Google.
Well, if you look at companies like Google and Facebook, you can only admire them because they sort of feed us a truth serum where actually we give them everything and they don't even ask anything. This is the age of oversharing, it's narcolepsis or narco-analysis almost. We give everything, so they just have to be there.
So it sounds like, obviously with kind of the accumulation and use of data being kind of where I feel like a lot of technology is going to be moving forward, and some of the most important technology. I mean, what kind of challenges is it going to be to deal with all of these, with the massive amounts of data? How is that going to happen moving forward? Because you've got all of these various data points, and I know this is something that you're already fighting with now. What is it going to look like in 5 to 10 years when we've got even more and more and more data? I mean, is it just going to be like everything is coming through one source eventually, and we've just got a dashboard that tells us everything about our lives? Is that how you see it ending up, something along those lines? Or, where are we headed?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
You're definitely going to need a dashboard. You're going to be able to need to choose what data is important to you and what's not. There's lots of data that you can collect that you never need to know about, that algorithms will chug away in the background on and then send a notification to your doctor if you need it. You're probably not going to know what data is being generated on you, which is kind of the same situation that we're in today. When you go to a pharmacy, they store that data and then they sell it in aggregate to pharmaceutical companies. We're going to, more thoughts?
I'm just thinking that there's a sort of critical point or a tipping point with data where once you have enough of it, you can start to do some amazing things with it. If you don't have good access to the data in the first place, it's hard to draw trends. It's hard to be predictive or prescriptive based on information. But if you think about being able to capture a vast amount of data from a lot of different people, suddenly there's a rich database on people of my age and and background and history, where I'll know how I'll react to a certain drug, or I guess it complements the sort of genome mapping and other information that's allows us to deliver much more personalized treatment or therapy. And so I think that the technology is there to handle vast amounts of data. Data storage has gotten almost infinitely inexpensive. So it's definitely gonna it's definitely gonna happen. And I think the exciting things are getting enough data in certain areas where we can start to really change the way we use it and deliver valuable insights or solutions back to even small groups of people.
Yeah.
I think so in all sorts of data strategies and information strategies, it's always about the territory and the map. The territory is our health. Somebody put a map on it, which is medicine. And so if you give these tools that we are now making to the crowd, so they will rewrite the map. So medicine will never be what it is now. We are at this tipping point. And probably our grandchildren will say, who were these people who lived like that? Who were these people who were passively just waiting for stuff to happen without acting, without even being, being angry that they didn't have the knowledge? We will not understand ourselves in the future anymore, I think.
Just one other example of an area where there's a lack of data today, and having data can really help change behavior. We're working on a product called the Check Light, which is an impact indicator for contact sports. Today, if you get hit in the head, you don't really know what happened unless it was something very severe. If you can quantify that data, collect it over a whole season of hits on the playing field, you'll have a much better understanding of what that means to your overall health. It doesn't necessarily correlate directly to things like traumatic brain injury and concussion, but you can finally build up that database to understand what it means to have certain types and frequencies of contact and hits. And today, there's just not a lot of information. Either you're passed out or you're dazed and you're going back in the game, and that's how people get hurt.
It's actually really amazing how little we know about our bodies. Mm-hmm. It's utterly amazing how little we know about ourselves. Mm-hmm. When we look at the opportunity to look at massive amounts of data, science just completely gets turned on its head. Because typically in science experiments, the real factor when you ask, was this a meaningful science experiment or not, is your N. Was the N big enough to get some statistically meaningful results? And when we finally have sensor solutions that are able to track and create massive amounts of data, you finally have statistically significant results.
Right, and doing that in an environment that is not just in a sleep lab overnight, or when you go into a clinic, but instead as you're living your daily life, whether it's when you're sleeping, whether it's something discrete you can wear when you go to the office, but collecting that like moving video as opposed to a single isolated data point really changes things, I think.
Science can literally get real. It can get into the places where we live our daily lives, not in the constraints of a lab.
Exactly.
Yeah, so what we wanted to, so with the consumer medical device, what we want to arrive at, and this was our view from the beginning, is, you see, if we check each of us on the internet, our visual life starts 15 years ago when Flickr came on. We have actually no pictures prior to that which are floating around or which we can consult. We have probably boxes of them which we haven't scanned in because the definition wasn't good. And so I think when people have this medical device, it's like a time machine where in 2015 they can look back in 2013 and say like, how was I doing then? What were my vital signs? Which meds did I take? How did that influence my sleep? And so how did I come to where I am now? What is the history of how I compensated for a loss of things, or how do I feel better now? I think the power to see if your meds work and to deduct for yourself where did this come from and how do I make my feel better, I think that will be an enormous liberation for each of us, I think.
So just kind of in a more general sense, I mean, outside of what your individual companies are doing, I mean, what kind of things are you seeing coming up on the horizon, and what technology do you see coming down the pike that excites you the most, or that you found, could be the most transformative, if any?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think the area of personalized medicine, whether it's trying to develop medicines that are very specific to a certain person, their DNA or their genome map, as well as sort of how tall or big or responsive to different things they are, is a true disruptive game changer. I mean, it's amazing that if we take a prescription drug, I mean, I guess they titrate it slightly for weight of an individual, but there's a lot of one-size-fits-all treatment for things that probably 20 years from now we'll look back and say that was crazy.
It's amazing that medicine works actually given the variation, because we're all actually mutants and we sort of obey to a study of averages, which we call medicine. I think in 5 years from now we will find out that medicine is protean and not unitary, that there is no medicine, but we're all very much different, and what may be fever for me or a high heart rate for me might not be good for you. Or so in everything that I spend a lot of time in hospitals and how hospitals work, and I love quantification and I love numbers, but in the end it's just an illusion to know that we are in control, but it's an illusion that is very powerful to us, because you are basically only as healthy as you tell yourself, and by watching the numbers it's a sort of a biofeedback and you get better.
To pick up on what you were saying, the idea that there are no baselines and that we are all our own baselines is a really important part of quantified self that doesn't come up often enough. Everyone thinks that when you're trying to look for numbers and you're trying to look for measures, you're trying to look to a norm, and everybody always wants to know, oh my God, am I better than the norm or worse than the norm? And that's not the question we should be asking. The question is, where do I sit? Where do I want to go? And how can this motivate me to get there? Because the numbers are not going to solve your problems. The numbers are not going to make you healthier. It's simply this small amount of insight that you have that then allows you to motivate yourself to improve and enhance and enable how you want to be. So this sort of data game or this number game is also on a certain level just a bit of a trick that works with our own human consciousness to bring us to the places where we want to go, to better health, to better self-understanding, to better cognition. And we get in a dangerous place where if we rely only on the data and too heavily on the data, it's a supporting part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and at the end of the day, you need a holistic approach, and looking, dwelling too much on one area or one number or one metric is always, it's not a great idea. And if you have a balanced view, I think the point is that if there are sort of key performance indicators on your health or wellness that you can isolate and track, and they might be different for me than they are for you guys. But yeah, if you can zero in on those, at least you have some things other than your general sense of well-being. And I think being able to diagnose things before we feel them, it's sort of a leading indicator of what might or will happen to us, can be really powerful, because it kind of gets back to how healthcare works today, where it's very reactive, and sometimes we end up having a catastrophic event before we end up in the emergency room. And if we instead had an early warning system, we could go get checked out, even if we're feeling fine, or we just thought we were tired that day or whatever.
I must say, like, so easily the debates on changing your health, arrive at a sort of a point where people believe that we can correct ourselves. And basically, I'm not interested in correcting myself, because I tried it so many times and I only change to avoid change. But I would like to be more documented in when I do something. And when I do something bad, like for instance, the third whiskey in an evening, which I shouldn't have drunk, I want to know that this is bad for me and that I do this in a documented way rather than, not knowing it.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, because it seems to me like a lot of what we've been talking about here is like providing people with information for their own behavioral modification, to be able to improve yourself. But you're saying you're not really interested in doing that, Walter? It's like the information is enough for you?
Well, we all pretend to, and I'll pretend with you collectively that we're all going to change and all going to be good, but in the end we don't. We keep it up for 3 hours and then sort of fall back in our position.
Yeah.
So for me, it's the opportunity for agency. When you have understanding, then you can make choices. And you can make the choice to do absolutely nothing, or you can realize that there is the possibility to do something, and if you so choose, do it. I am an entire advocate of loving yourself as you are, and change is only interesting if you find it interesting. And I believe data technology is also there so that you can understand who you are more deeply. And that in and of itself is a phenomenally fascinating and meaningful pursuit. If through that discovery you just find some little things that you may wish to change or you may wish to enhance, you have the opportunity to do that and potentially more data to do that with.
Yeah, I think so what needs to change and what I hope will change is how we ourselves as patients and consumers come to doctors, because just to also take the side of the doctors, just imagine that you have to see like 30 people and everyone comes in and he doesn't know anything about his health and he doesn't know anything what I'm talking about, and it's frustrating because whatever I give him, he will do it all over again. So, and I just have to keep his records and I don't have a lot of time, and they hold me accountable. So I would rather have a more sane relationship with my doctor where I have like this enormous amount of information and he's my information analyst and he can tell me something that I really need, a point of view in that overflow of information. And then I can have a adult conversation with him where I understand the parameters of health and where he knows that I understand. And I think that would be, if there is one way out of our systems that are breaking down all over the world, our healthcare system, if there is one way out, that has to change.
Yeah, I think just one other point is that there will be a situation where we're incentivized to try and change our behavior, right? There are people that may be a very high cost to the system that may not be the least bit interested in change, but in order to qualify for a certain rate from a provider or from a payer, we may decide to collect information and use that to have somebody else give us a call and help us out with our health. So there are a lot of, I guess, personal decisions to make about how to do it, but I think financial incentives can help reinforce that, or will need to help reinforce that behavior.
So just kind of last question here. I mean, how far out do you think we are before, I mean, I know all of you have your products coming to market in the near future, but obviously this is kind of like the first gen of a lot of these type systems that are starting to get integrated. I mean, how long do you think it's going to be before people are regularly learning a lot more about themselves and are able, and these kinds of products are ubiquitous and aren't just showing up at events like these and at CES, and like they're actually in the hands of a large swath of population. How soon is that future going to be here, do you think?
Well, in some ways, that future is absolutely here. Your cell phone probably has 12 different sensors, 17, some massive number of sensors in it. So everyone with a smartphone in their pocket, which I'm guessing is a large proportion of the population, at least in the developed world at this point, they are already participating in the sensor revolution. When are we going to start to see people with more devices on their bodies? Probably in the next 3 to 5 years. You already have a massive upsweep with small devices like Fitbit. Their numbers were 5 the first year, 20 the second, 100 the third year. So you're seeing really an exponential ramp.
Yeah, I think that as the devices themselves provide information that's more useful, we'll see a rapid uptake in adoption. And I think the other piece is if we can overcome some of the obstacles to adoption, like discomfort or something that's noticeable. If we can have something that's virtually invisible to the user, extremely comfortable but still delivers high quality data, we'll see rapid acceleration in adoption from consumer health and wellness to connected health.
I share that optimism, and as a card-carrying member of the baby boom generation, so we are of course completely committed now. We have just reinvented retirement. It now happens in the next life. So I think that we will put everything, all the efforts that we have now in actually changing that healthcare system. And I feel that that robotic moment, as Turco calls it, is coming. People not only believe more in machines and are ready to accept more help from machines, but there is also something else. They're more interested in their healthcare. And so, of course, the numbers are also now getting very interesting. So I think baby boomers have invented the future. They are now going to try to prevent it, which will be good for everyone because diseases can be delayed and prevented, most diseases. So I'm very optimistic about the next 5 to 10 years.
So generally speaking, the future is just about here then. Is that what we're going with? Yeah?
Yep.
All right, well, that's all that we have for today. Everyone, thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Walter, for joining me on the stage here. And thank you all for coming. That's all I've got now. The show floor will be open, and there will be some food trucks showing up out front. So thanks, guys. That's all we got for now.